Hello, hi, and welcome to Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mbali Mziane, and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And today we're talking about a very, very interesting topic, a topic that can help you manage your stress levels, help you boost your productivity, and potentially even enhance and enrich your overall work experience. We're talking about mindfulness in the workplace and the benefits thereof of mindfulness. And I'm speaking to a CEO of the networking company, best-selling author and author of upcoming book, Networking for Introverts. She's also a networking, mindful resilience, and focus expert. Her name is Helen Nicholson. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Hi, I'm Mbali.
Thank you so much for being here and just for making the time to share some insights around mindfulness. I think for me, the context that I've really come across mindfulness in has been in my personal life. And, you listen to podcasters like Jay Shetty, for example, and they talk about the benefits of just being mindful and being more present in your body and in your environment. But I'm very interested to understand what that looks like in the workplace. But before we get into that aspect of our discussion, can we talk a bit more about what mindfulness actually is, and then we can unpack how it applies to the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are many definitions of mindfulness, and I don't think there's whatever your definition is, it's probably correct. But one that resonates with me is I think mindfulness is when you bring your brain and your body into the same place at the same time with intention. Because often, we can be sitting here or someone who's listening to this can be listening to the podcast with one ear, and with the other ear, they're busy, thinking about something else. There's very seldom as human beings, I think we've been educated and socialized into multitasking constantly. And that ability to say, okay, I'm now going to be mindfully present as a parent. I'm now going to bring my complete focused attention on my child with intention for the next half an hour. To me, that is a good definition of mindfulness because it's then a conscious choice.
Yes. So when it comes to your interest in mindfulness, I'm interested to know in what led you to explore the concept of mindfulness, and how did you then start integrating that into your professional life and personal life?
So I have nearly burnt out twice, and the second time I nearly died. So I was working too hard. I was working very long hours. I wasn't resting enough. And eventually, I think your body just says enough. And, I do agree with that Gabor Mate book, The Body Keeps the Score, because it does. Because and it's always been hard for me because I've been very connected to my purpose in life. So I know that I was put on this planet to ignite the fire in people and to help them learn some of the lessons that have been helpful to me. So I get very excited when I see the lights going on in people's eyes. And so when you're very connected to your purpose, and, specifically for women too, that is really what gets me up in the morning. So I've got a lot to do, and I'm a woman on a mission.
Yes.
So, to manage your energy within that kind of container has always been challenging for me. And I was a single mom of twins for 13 years. So I raised them on my own from when they were 3, and I remarried 7 years ago. So it's been an interesting journey. So I think the burnout and this, realizing that you're not invincible led me to realize that I need more practical techniques. And I think because I'm an ex-accountant, I'm a deeply practical woman. So I never approached mindfulness from a kind of yoga, psychology background, and that has its place. So I wanted deeply practical tools that I could immediately implement in my life. So that need sent me on a quest. And I think my first experience of the power of mindfulness was I went on a course in the States called The Corporate Athlete. It's run by two tennis coaches, actually. And they've written a big Harvard Business Review article called Managing Energy, Not Time.
Yes.
And they ran a program called The Corporate Athlete. And it's the first time I realized that you can be very mindful about the way in which you approach your time. Because in many ways, apparently we have 4,000 weeks as human beings. So if you live to 80, if you live, to around 80, you have 4,000 weeks in your life, which is quite a sobering thought. And I also had two friends pass away at the end of last year. Sure. And there's nothing like people who are younger than you, passing to actually realize the value of a week or an hour or a day. So it was a real wake-up call. But I think that corporate athlete program was very pivotal because I had to do some exercises around, first of all, to realize that stress is not the bad guy.
Okay.
That the absence of recovery is actually the problem.
Interesting.
So that epiphany is that, I think we spend a lot of time as human beings trying to manage our time. And if we mindfully manage our energy, that is a much more interesting conversation, because when you bring maximum energy to an hour or a day or a month, then, you are actually unlimited as a human being. So that epiphany to realize that stress often forces us into a high performance state.
Sure.
It's actually often where we do our best work. If you think you've got an exam tomorrow or you've got an urgent presentation, your adrenaline and cortisol that is flowing through your body is there to serve you to perform. But what the corporate athlete premise taught me is that we're not designed to be stressed all the time. We're actually designed to stress ourselves and then recover. Stress and recover. Instead of starting meetings off at 8 o'clock in the morning and just have this flat line, meeting. And often I say to delegates on our leadership programs that the problem with that model is that your work gets the best version of you and there's nothing left over for you or for your family at night, because that's why you crash at, on the couch in front of Netflix in the evening. So that was kind of where my mindfulness journey started, was around that you can better manage your energy in the days that we have. And then the second exercise that they did was they got us to do this exercise called your old story versus your new story. Okay. And it was an incredibly powerful exercise, because what it does, it uncovers some of the beliefs that hold us in a holding pattern. So, I always think if you've got a New Year's resolution that you keep on setting every year, but it doesn't, at the end of the year, you just haven't been able to master whatever this thing is. And it often keeps us in cul-de-sacs. But the premise of the old story exercise is you write the truth is. And I'd encourage, people who are listening to this podcast to actually just take a blank piece of paper and start off at the top with the truth is. And you write down what's going on, what's actually not working in your life. And it's often quite a sad moment, because if these things were easy, we would have already sorted them out.
Yes.
And then in your new story, you really go an extra level down about the truth. Is that really the truth? And I had to confront the reality that I was putting work above everything else. And I actually had a story going on in my head that I couldn't have it all. I had a disastrous relationship since I got divorced. And I thought it's not possible for me to be a single mom of twins, run two businesses, and have a personal relationship. And that came out very powerfully in my old story exercise. And if I wanted to move to the new story, I had to acknowledge that I actually do need someone. And I was sending off the message that I don't need anyone.
You can do it by
absolutely, I miss independence. So confronting that new story was very powerful, because ultimately I realized that I actually would like a partner, and I manifested him, because it took him about 7 years to arrive, but he did arrive. But I found that process of that old story, new story, very powerful in terms of shifting your beliefs, because I also had a belief that you've got to be busy all the time.
Yes.
And that recovery is laziness.
Yes.
And it was only when I confronted that to realize that recovery is actually the secret source of high performance.
Sure. I think that's so powerful. And in what you were saying, you mentioned that, you had to go through 2 episodes where you were almost burnt out. And I want us to stay a little bit more on that, because I think that's where then the mindfulness comes in, or the need for mindfulness comes in, because it usually takes something that alarming for us to stop in our tracks and say, I need to make a change. So, number one, what were the indicators that you were burning out at the time? And before understanding the concept of recovery, how did you then start, integrating practical tools to help you start with your recovery journey?
So, coming back to the earlier point around the body keeps the score, I had been ill with recurring flu. So I'd had it 3 times in a row, and I'd been on antibiotics and nothing was working. And our family decided to go to the Drakensberg for the Easter weekend. And on this Easter Saturday, I woke up and I wasn't feeling well at all. And they were all going to go on a hike. And I wanted to go on the hike, and I was frustrated with my body because my body was not keeping up with what I wanted to do.
Yes.
And so I took my antibiotic on an empty stomach, and then I thought I would add in another medication, because I'm not Dr. Nicholson and I would not advise this because it had a very bad result. And basically those 2 medications contraindicated each other.
Sure.
And my family found me naked on the shower floor of our kind of chalet, and I'd gone into anaphylactic shock. So anaphylactic shock, I subsequently discovered, is you have an hour to get medical help. And basically they need to give you adrenaline, cortisone, and an antihistamine. And what was interesting about this incident is they managed to get me to Winterton, which was the nearest town, and there was a doctor available that morning. But I was actually only going to take the medication on the Sunday, because I thought, let me give myself a day to kind of breathe some mountain air.
Yes.
And if I'd done that on the Sunday, that doctor would have been closed, and the nearest hospital was 4 hours away. So I wouldn't be sitting here.
You've lost your life.
Yeah. So I think that realization that things had to change was, and also I had to deal with my family, who was obviously very traumatized, seeing me in that state, including my children. So I realized that we have to make another plan. And the big epiphany for me was about the importance of recovery, that I don't have to be full steam ahead Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, and actually I've got to start being a lot more creative with my energy.
Sure.
And do things that fill up my tank, and just not end up depleted in that space again. Because it's a scary space.
It is a scary space. It really is. So in terms of then that creative energy, I want to tap into that a bit more. What does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis when you're working? So how does then this type of mindfulness and mindfulness of that creative energy apply to the workplace?
So what I do is I bookend my day. And one of these rituals actually started during COVID, because what I found that I was doing, and I think a lot of people still do this, is as soon as we wake up, we look at our phones. And
guilty.
It's just such a natural thing.
Yeah.
And I realized I really didn't like the sensation that was happening in my body, especially during COVID, because I think we were all very addicted to news. We wanted to see what was going on. And I just felt this real anxiety in my body, doing that. So I decided to replace that ritual. And I moved my phone out of my bedroom. So our phones get charged in the kitchen.
Okay.
I bought one of those old-fashioned alarm clocks that is load shedding proof from Clicks. And so that I can see what the time is, during the night if you wake up. And what I do is in the morning, I wake up, I go and have a cup of rooibos tea, I go downstairs, I stare at the garden, and then I do 15 minutes of breathing.
Okay.
And then I'm allowed to switch on my phone.
Okay.
And I found that half an hour It can be like half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on how much time I've got. But that was my time. And that almost grounds me for the day. It makes me more mindful. And I can tell, for example, yesterday morning I had a very early start because I had to speak somewhere. So it was just, I was leaving home at 6:30 in the morning, which is unusual. And I hadn't done that. And I can feel how that derails me. So that's my first bookend. And then the second one is I keep a gratitude journal and I do a page of gratitude every night before I go to sleep. And my husband lies next to me and he asks me what the nice things I've said about him are. So, and I have to do a page and I'm only allowed to kind of go to sleep unless until I've done that page. And there are 3 things I write every day. So that are the same. And it's grateful for my Sabrina, Caitlin, Michael, Mom, Dad, Dan, Mark, Diane, Andrew, and Kim's health. That's my whole family, and I name them. I'm grateful for the amazing young women Sabrina and Caitlin, my children, are becoming. And I'm grateful for the love of Michael. I'm on my second marriage, so I'm appreciating him. And those 3 things happen every day. And then the rest of it is day specific. So it'll be things like my cappuccino or a great meeting. So today I'll write about meeting you and the podcast.
Amazing. I'll do the same.
So, and I find that those 2 things, they make you realize the power of a day, is because often I think our days blur into days. It's Monday, then it's Friday, it's Monday, then it's Friday. And I feel that anchors me that we're all on Wednesday today.
So in what you're saying, I think it does convey that the responsibility is on the individual to integrate mindfulness in their day-to-day lives. But now bringing it into a formal workplace within, you have organizations, leaders, managers that are always just putting, their teams under pressure, driving numbers, driving results. What do you think their role is in driving teams or a culture that is a lot more mindful, and how can it benefit them?
So I think what I've noticed is one of the first principles of mindfulness is self-compassion. So I think you've got to start off, because often people are hard on other people because they are hard on themselves.
Sure.
And I've realized that when you become more compassionate with yourself, I lead a team of 15 and we've got 20 associates. And I have always been a very driven, and now also we've got stuff to do.
Yes.
And I know that I'm a demanding boss. I have been told that. But what I realized is as I became more mindful and I practiced more self-compassion towards myself, that reflected my leadership style. I demand high performance. I want, I've got clear boundaries, etc. But we practice gratitude a lot as a team. So we bring a lot of these practices into the way in which we work. And for example, I gave the team last year and this year an extra 9 days leave over and above, the standard leave that we kind of tie generally onto public holidays. And we know them at the beginning of the year because I know that everyone is performing at a max. And I realize that I think if I'm expecting high performance from the team, I've also got to amplify their recovery.
Yes.
So that was a very practical way. And I don't work on a Friday. So I have a 4-day work week. And I know, but I really go for it in those 4 days. I fit a lot in. I'm very focused. I generally only have meetings in the afternoon. I keep the mornings for my deep work time. And I found deep work is a very powerful mindfulness technique to improve the quality of your work. And deep work essentially is working for 90 minutes on one thing and switching off your phone, making sure you're in Microsoft offline, and you just do one thing. And I mean, it sounds so basic, but it's just so interesting that very seldom, I think we've become addicted to multitasking.
Yes.
And when I was doing the research for my mindfulness book, there was a piece of research that said every time you're in a document and an email pops up, So even if you just see it on your screen, you actually don't even go and open it, but you've seen the heading and you see who it's from, you are distracting yourself between 8 and 12 minutes. So that constant task switching, which is what our brain has become addicted to, is very tiring. Our brain actually doesn't like it. So that's why we get exhausted at the end of the day, but we also haven't actually accomplished much because we constantly, because if you think if every time you're in an Excel spreadsheet, then you go out to go and look at an email that takes you 8 to 12 minutes to bring your attention back again. You know, it's almost like shifting car gears and increasing your car is just getting quite sluggish.
Yes.
So that was a real epiphany for me, that this multitasking, because I used to define myself with my ability. Yes, I even got a job because they said she was a great multitasker, and I wore that as a badge of honor. And little did I know that actually your brain is a single processing unit. It does not like doing more than one thing at a time, and it makes it anxious, and it makes you unhappy.
So as a leader then, what do you think then the benefits have been for your team in terms of integrating mindfulness? So what results then have you seen in your team, in their performance as a result of integrating mindfulness?
Well, I think we have a growing team. We're a strengths-based business. You know, I strongly believe that we need to focus more on our strengths and our weaknesses. Because often I find that, you know, so many times, especially in performance appraisals, people just get feedback about their development areas, and which I don't think is very helpful. So I think that we mindfully pay attention to our strengths, and and I think that we've had strong retention in the business. You know, we've had the same team and growing team, and everyone's been with us for kind of 10 years and more. So, and we've got a young team. So the Gen Zs that are joining, they like working there, because we're also not a micromanager culture. Everyone's got stuff to do. You get given a task for the week and tasks, and then everyone goes and does it.
And in terms of then the performance and results, I mean, practically speaking, the bottom line and profitability of your business, have you seen that as a benefit of mindfulness and integrating some of these wellness practices into the organization?
Yeah, I really have. I mean, our business grows every year, kind of quite dramatically, you know, and even through COVID. And so, you know, we're very grateful. And I'm also we focus on just being better versions of us. So we mindfully focused on our performance. I'm not really interested in competitors or what other people are doing. You know, we're in our lane, and we're trying to be as best in that lane as what is possible to be. And for me, you know, I because that's where I want to put our mindful attention. I think sometimes we worry too much about what other people think and what other people are doing, and quite frankly, that's their lane. Our lane is, we want to deliver amazing value to our delegates and to our clients. And that's all we're putting our attention on.
That's the mindfulness part of you doing your business. So we highlighted then the misconceptions around things like multitasking and, you know, running at high levels of stress. I want to then talk about what the misconceptions of mindfulness are, because I think when you talk about taking time out and resting or focusing on one thing at a time, you know, people who are high performers typically would think that, oh, but that's a waste of my time. Why am I taking 5 minutes to just go outside and breathe? How's that going to benefit me when I could be responding to an email? And I think that in itself is a misconception. So can we talk a little bit more about what are the other misconceptions that can come up from mindfulness and practicing that, especially as a working professional?
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that recovery is laziness. And I think people wear their overworkness as a badge of honor.
So what is recovery? Let's talk a bit more about that. What does it look like?
So recovery is resting.
Okay.
It's allowing, and rest, remember, probably looks different to you and me. So I have used, because I love words and reading, I've used words as a metaphor. So if you look and you think of your day as a sentence, I've always thought, what is your full stop at the end of your day? What is your recovery ritual that marks the end of your working day? So in our house, we have 2, and we've just introduced a third one.
Okay.
So at about 5:30, 6 o'clock, I have a bath and I get in my pajamas. I'm that girl in my pajamas at 6 o'clock. I then sit down with my husband and we have a whiskey. That's the second full stop, because that means I'm now done for the day. I'm not working again, because I also know if I work in the evening, I make mistakes. It's actually, there's a deeply practical benefit of that. So I don't bring out my laptop again. I know I can change the world between 5 and 9 in the morning, and kind of I deteriorate after that. So I'm very conscious of doing very important work first thing, because that's when I'm, ready to, it's where my brain is best.
Yes.
I've taken the recovery rituals and applied it to your week. If you imagine your week as a paragraph.
Okay.
How do you recover over the weekend? And I generally find people are quite good at that. They've got something in place. So in our house, we never go out on a Friday night. We have a braai, I have You magazine, and knickknacks.
Okay.
So that happens every Friday in our house. And on Saturday, I try in the morning and have a digital detox, almost a sabbatical.
Okay.
So, or a Sabbath. And I go for a walk with my friends in the morning. We have coffee, and then I take my phone and I put it somewhere else. And I'll sit on the couch and I'll read the newspaper. I'll watch a Netflix series. I read, but I don't do anything. And I also don't look at my device for at least 2 or 3 hours. And I notice how hard that is.
It is hard.
Because one of the problems is if you're trying to allow your body to rest, then those little dopamine hits that come, from your notification saying, this one's liked this reel, this one's liked your story, this one's, so I think that people have got to buy into the power of recovery first. You've got to look at your recovery story, because unless you have that mental shift to think that recovery is going to result in a calmer, happier, high-performing you, then you get caught in that trap. So you recover, but you're kind of doing a half-baked job.
Yes.
And then I also encourage people to think of their chapter as a month and to instill a monthly recovery ritual. So I've always had a life philosophy is when the going gets tough, the tough go to spas, as in SPAS. So I have either a facial or a massage once a month on a Friday, kind of late in the afternoon, and I book them in advance. And then obviously your book is your year, and I want to challenge that South African paradigm around recovery that often only happens in December. And because I think that increasingly as our performance demands have increased, we've got to look at our recovery in a much more strategic way. And I learned a lot from a colleague of mine. He would get one of those big planners. They come out in the supermarkets in September. And he would put it on their dining room table, marks the public holidays for the following year. And then he books and he pays for little mini breaks. 3 days is the magic number, not 2 days. 3 days is allows you to have a proper rest. And they go camping a lot. So they're not expensive. And he preferably chooses places where there's very bad signal or bad Wi-Fi. Because then you can feel your body just going, whew.
Yeah.
And it gives, I think it's that exhale. So my challenge to everyone who's listening here is, what is your daily recovery ritual, your monthly, your weekly, and your yearly? Because what I've realized is often people are not being intentional about their recovery. They're saying, in 2024, I want to achieve more from a performance perspective. I want to, increase targets or, budgets, whatever it is. But yet they'd have no recovery amplified strategy.
Sure. And
that means then your equation is often then destined for burnout. Because I think that people, I find, buy into recovery when they've had a health scare.
Yeah, definitely. In speaking about recovery, I can't help but think about setting boundaries. And I think it takes one to have really firm and strong boundaries to be consistent in having that daily recovery period, monthly, weekly, yearly, etc. So for people who struggle with setting those boundaries, whether it is with work, whether it is at home, how can they start doing that in a practical way?
I think boundaries have a root around self-worthiness. I think that when you believe that you deserve rest and recovery, then you will get that. I think the people who battle the most with us they're twofold. One is the people who think that you have to hustle and you have to be busy all the time to be successful. So that's one group of people. And I think the other people are people who want to say yes to everything and want to please people. And I think they both battle, but for different reasons. I think that when people get good at boundaries, they've got to realize that they deserve rest and recovery. And for me, the epiphany was to realize that I'm not going to be good at everything. I'm going to be very selective about where I'm going to put my unique ability. Where does Helen act in a way that is going to bring the most value to the world? Because it's not everything. So, and I'll give you a motherhood example, is I decided quite early on with my girls that I was not going to be the tuck shop mom. I was not going to be the mom because that's not who I am. And I take a lot of strain doing that, Yes. So that was not going to be who I was. And so therefore I would outsource that. But what I did decide is the kind of mother I'm going to be is that I'm a voracious reader. So I would read to them every night, and we'd read all the stories that I read from my childhood. I would share business lessons with them. I taught them about investments. I taught them about skincare. So the things that are important to me, so I decided that was my mother brand. And I think that was an important mindfulness strategy, because I think when you try to be all things to all people, that's when you battle with boundaries, because you just are trying to please everybody. And in the end, I think end up pleasing very little people or very few people.
When you say yes to others, you're actually saying no to yourself. That's exactly it. Yeah. I want to just end this portion of our discussion around one of your favorite sayings, that no one is coming to save you. And how do you think mindfulness and boundary setting really speaks to that?
So I think I have a personal belief system that you are the one you've been waiting for. So there's a strong degree of personal responsibility. So I think mindfulness is, if you apply it to you, the buck stops with you. I don't think, because I think when we're in victim mode, I think it's very easy to blame other people for this or that, and you know that you're not where you want to be in your life. I think when you become mindfully aware that the personal responsibility to change rests solely with you, and that you can't wait for other people. I think as people, we spend a lot of time as people in waiting. So we wait for bosses to recognize us. We wait for partners to pick us. We wait for children to appreciate us. And when you realize that no one is coming to rescue you, you are the one. You are the big love affair of your life. And I find that it's quite scary, but it's liberating at the same time. You know, I have an 81-year-old mom. She's turning 81 on Saturday. And she said to me, I can't believe that people pay you to tell you that no one is coming. She says, I wouldn't pay you 5 cents. She goes, it's very depressing, Helen. So I said, Mom, it's actually not. It's very liberating. And I believe that if you're going to live a life with mindful intention, to realize that the buck stops with you is very liberating.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Let's talk about your upcoming book. I think that's exciting. This is your fourth book, and it's titled Networking for Introverts. I want to talk about what interested you in that area of research. You're well versed in a number of areas, but specifically a book dedicated to equip introverts in navigating a typically overwhelming space for them. What interested you in that?
So, I've been training people on how to network and build powerful personal brands for nearly 20 years.
Yes.
And we do a lot of work in financial services. And typically, our delegate generally is not, they're people who are technically very good at what they do. And then I often meet them when they're kind of 35-ish, and they say to me, there's an over-reliance on their technical competence. and they wonder why they're not getting promoted or recognized as they should. And what I realized is that it's because they're not packaging their value in a way that people begin to get them. So I had this kind of hunch that introverts were actually better networkers than extroverts. And I speak as an extrovert because two of the key networking skills, one is listening.
Yes.
And introverts are very good listeners, whereas extroverts are often busy talking about their
Of
favorite
course.
subject, which is
Or
themselves. Exactly. And the second key networking skill is following up. And introverts are much more likely to do that. Whereas extroverts get energized by the interaction, they lose the contact details and they don't follow up. So I had this hunch, and then I decided to put it to the test. So over the last 4 years, I interviewed 253 introverts all over the world in focus groups and individuals. And I asked them some questions. And then parallel to this kind of the questionnaire is I did a whole lot of research about what makes good networkers and kind of overlaid the two. And what was fascinating is if introverts get certain things right, and I believe it's their superpowers. So they, for example, get good at telling better stories.
Sure.
So their impact and influence grows. They learn the value of packaging their value, and they also learn how to navigate networking events in a way that feels comfortable to them. I always say, like, if you can connect with two people, you've done really well. And I interviewed many very successful introverts who said that that's their rule. They go to a function, and if they've done two meaningful interactions, they listened intently to the people, they were curious, and then they followed up afterwards. That's how a network often is built. So I really decided I would pour my heart and soul into this book and do the A to Z guide. So from beginning to end, if you do all of the techniques that I advocate, then you will be an amazing connector and networker.
Sure. Can't wait to read that. And for anybody who is listening or watching, where can they find the book? When is it coming out?
So it will be available at exclusive books from next week, the 30th of July. And there will be a launch at exclusive books in Hyde Park on I think it's Wednesday, the 15th of August.
Okay.
So, and it'll be available on Take-A-Lot and also on Kindle on Amazon.
All right. I can't wait to actually grab a copy of that. I think I'm more of an ambivert. I'd like to believe that I'm a trained introvert because I realize the value of positioning yourself. And I mean, through the program, or one of the programs that you run with the networking company that I was fortunate to be part of, quite a lot of emphasis was, put on personal branding and also the value of networking. So definitely is something that you intentionally cultivate to be able to do it better and to reap the rewards of it. So looking forward to checking that book out. In closing, my favorite question to all my guests is, what does wellness in the workplace look like for you?
I think it's you being the best version of yourself and you honoring the gifts that you were given and putting that out to the world. I heard a wonderful saying just before COVID that said you can't be brave if you're not well. And I think that's such a profound statement because I think that bravery is such a in-demand skill because your bravery leads to relevance.
Yes.
But you actually, your brain won't go to bravery because it happens in your prefrontal cortex if it's stuck in fight or flight mode. Because if you're existing and you're surviving, for example, if you haven't had a good night's sleep, it's not possible for you to be brave because your body is then in survival mode. And I just think for me, the lesson from COVID was that we get one shot at this life. We have those 4,000 weeks I spoke about earlier. And I think we owe it to ourselves to bring the best version of ourselves to every day because they do count.
Helen, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for taking the time to just grace us with your presence, share your insights, and also just share details about your upcoming book. Definitely looking forward to that. And thank you for watching and for tuning in. I hope that you found this episode very fruitful and valuable, and that you are taking a lot more notes on how you can integrate mindfulness into your day-to-day life. Do continue subscribing to the podcast if you're not subscribed. Do continue listening if you have been tuned into previous episodes. My name is Mindfulness. You will catch me on the next episode of Wellness in the Workplace. Bye-bye.